Welcome to the show. If you've never joined us, this is the show where we go upstream, away from politics, to the sources of culture. Today's guest is Joseph Sciambra. Joseph grew up in a loving, stable home in the Bay Area, went to Catholic schools from K through 12. Early on, however, the talons of pornography got their hooks in Joseph's young soul and began to slowly destroy his moral compass. And eventually it led him to a level of darkness he never dreamed existed. Throughout the 1990s, Joseph lived in and around the homosexual culture of the Castro district in San Francisco, California. Later became an amateur porn actor and male escort. After a near-death experience and some scary encounters with the demonic, he returned to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and the Catholic Church and has since been writing and speaking about the reality of pornography on its users and also on its performers, as well as writing about the occult. His website is josephsciambra.com. That's SCIAMBRA.com. Joseph, so great to have you aboard, sir.
Hello, Patrick.
I want to acknowledge that you were on the very first episode that I did of Catholic Answers Focus, along with a Muslim convert. So you can tell we don't care about controversy all that much.
Yeah.
So, but we and I know you do this. We're all about hitting nerves, not for reasons of provocation, but for reasons of clarity. I wanted to kind of hit the rewind and touch upon something that you wrote once on your blog, and it stuck with me, and I think it was a YouTube commentary that you made. You said, porn essentially made you gay. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, when you start out watching porn, specifically as a boy and a little kid, usually you begin pretty tame. It's like a drug addiction. Nobody starts out shooting heroin, mainlining heroin. You usually start out drinking liquor or smoking pot, which aren't good things. But porn is like a gateway to all sorts of other sexual perversities, and it lowers your inhibitions, and it makes things look like they're okay and they're fun, and there's no risks involved. So as a young boy, when I'm looking at porn, you quickly tire of certain scenarios or certain models, and you move on to other things, and you keep moving on and you keep moving on until, not everybody looks at, very hardcore types of porn, but I did. And so I started looking at gay porn just because I had other things going on in my life. My relationship with men were not good. So I was just drawn to it, and it looked good to me. So
it's like the next river to cross after the now comparatively boring heterosexual stuff. You want to do something a little more taboo. How old were you when you were first exposed to straight porn?
As straight porn, about 8 years old.
8. Jeez.
But that's not unusual. The average age nowadays is 11, and these kids are looking at internet porn, which is a completely different forum than, say, I was looking at Playboy, which isn't necessarily benign, but I mean they're totally different. So,
how much more lethal or how much more potent is internet porn in your estimation compared to the glossy magazines of the 70s, say?
Oh, the type of pornography that you can view on the internet very quickly, I never saw when I was involved as a porn viewer and a porn participant. I didn't even know it existed. Mm-hmm. And I mean, by the late 90s, when I was doing some very kinky sort of porn, it was considered pretty radical. Now it would be like nothing. We're in such a different generation now.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
That was the generation of Madonna, where she was sort of the expert of the tease, and now we're in the generation of Lady Gaga, where she comes out with blood and gore, and it's completely different,
Mm-hmm.
Not that one was better than the other, but it's much more fast now.
So it's a spectrum of intensity, or a spectrum of perversity, you could say.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is.
I read your book, Swallowed by Satan, and it's very gnarly. I've complained to you about how gnarly it is, but I'm not your primary demo reader, so I understand that someone who is in that lifestyle, I guess, needs to hear it put in a more blunt unvarnished way. And one of the things that struck me about your story that you tell in that book, Joseph, is the dark alliance, or I'm trying to find the best way to put it, the interconnection between the pornographic world and the world of the occult. Almost like the more perverse you get in the pornographic depictions, the more broad is the avenue into which evil spirits will visit, and they will influence your life. Am I summarizing it correctly?
Yeah, I would say so. There's a certain emptiness that draws people to pornography in the first place. You're dealing with some sort of inner torment, and that opens you up not only to viewing, very perverse images, but it also just opens you up to all sort of other demonic influences. You're right, and in homosexuality and in pornography, I was looking for so much, and I think a lot of people that go to that stuff, you don't switch on porn necessarily as just entertainment. I mean, I think for men it goes so much more deeper than that. I think you're looking for some sort of intimacy, and you're looking for some sort of answer to what's bothering you. And when homosexuality and pornography and all those things really fell flat, you do become sort of desperate, and you do look for other things. And I did do that. And I think there's just an instinctual drive in humanity, just to establish some sort of order in your life. And when you don't have it, you look for it. And in homosexuality and in the type of porn that I was drawn to was very disciplined and very rigid and very severe, and it had to do with bondage. And I mean, that really had to do with the emptiness that I had in me that I was trying to fill. Mm-hmm. And a lot of certain occult practices and ideologies, I thought, really filled that for me. And well, of course it didn't.
Could you call it a psychic or visual equivalent of self-harm or cutting?
Oh yeah, I used to do all that stuff too. When I outreach, there were so many things. When you're in the middle of something, you just don't see it. It's weird. Yeah. But as a Christian and as ex-gay, I've gone back to the gay community, and I sort of see things. It's weird. I mean, because it's all the stuff that I was involved with, and I thought it was cool and it was okay. But I go back now and I just see it through a different lens. And I just went to one of the gay sex fairs in the cities, and you see men that are bound and being beaten and tied, and it's sort of like this weird reenactment of Christian martyrdom and flagellation, and it's so empty, and there's a deep inner longing in them for something transcendent, but it's just missing the mark. It just keeps missing it.
How old were you when you had your first homosexual encounter?
18.
How long did it take you, Joseph, to adopt the "I am gay" label? Because you and I have talked about the 80s, right? And the fluidity of sexuality then. The 80s were, to me, the 80s were the 70s with bigger hair and a little more glitter. If you look at the music of the 70s and the first mainstreamization of homosexual behavior, well, of course, actually, let me back up. Not the behavior, but the lifestyle through shows like, remember Soap? Billy Crystal's character was the first kind of openly gay TV character. But before that, there was another Norman Lear show called Hot L Baltimore. It didn't last very long. That was 1974, I believe. And from then, you've got Archie Bunker's plays. I think Archie's friend comes out as gay. And then I remember the Jeffersons. Remember the Jeffersons moving on up to the east side? His army buddy, Eddie, told him one day that he's now Edie. So this is all the 70s. This isn't like the 1990s. So there's the seeds had already been planted for this kind of fluidity and so-called freedom. Talk a little bit about the music. And you mentioned Madonna as a kind of iconic almost high priestess of all this.
Yeah. You can't forget Three's Company either, where it was
right,
just,
that's right. Jack,
yeah. I used to watch that all the time. I shouldn't have, and I don't think my parents knew that I was watching it. But yeah, you had this weird sort of thing where people were sleeping with different people, and it was just very, crazy. It's interesting because I was thinking about this in the 80s, especially with the new age, the new wave.
Yeah.
Or the new romantics. You had this sort of reaction because the 70s was very glamorous and sort of bacchanalian, and it was very, it was like a big orgy with Studio 54 and all that. And with like the Eurythmics and who else, like Duran Duran, even Bananarama, there was this sort of this illusion, especially in the videos, to bondage, and it became, the style was very harsh and it was severe, and I think it was just a reaction to all that in the 80s, because in the 70s, because by 1978 you had the first AIDS cases. So, I mean, that was very much unraveling right away. And like I talked about earlier, I think there's that instinctual desire for order. And you see that in that music, which just that electronic music, like Joe Moroder. And it was very disciplined.
Now, when you say discipline, you're referring to like Bondage and Discipline, a kind of dark parody of, in a way, it's a parody of chastity, isn't it? The idea of self-governing, but this is tyranny over yourself, willing tyranny over yourself by someone else.
Right. Yeah, Patrick. When I was in, when I was out and gay, and I was into the sort of the BDSM scene, it was often sequestered to, like, I don't know if people know San Francisco, but there's like a south of Market or Soma area, which is still kind of gritty, and that's where, if you were a gay man and you wanted to get involved with that scene, that's where you'd go. But now that I've returned, as like I said, as a missionary, I see a lot of this bondage gear everywhere and people wearing it, and again, there's been like this counter reaction. The more sexual freedom that you have, and I mean, people have it more now than ever, the more they are drawn to enslavement. I know it sounds crazy, but there's this instinctual like drive, I said again, for order, and that's the way they do it. Is that there's so much sexual possibilities that I see people acting out these themes of bondage.
Go ahead.
It doesn't seem to make sense, but when I think about it, it makes sense.
I think our Lord spoke directly to it in John 8, verse 34. He who sins is a slave.
Yeah.
I mean, it's willing slavery, right? That's the tragic part. You've got the key, but you don't unlock your own chains. You keep adding layer after layer. Joseph, I wanted to ask you about reparative therapy. And the end point here is to get to Jesus Loves Gay Men and what you do as a missionary in the Castro district. But you and I both knew the late Joseph, Joe Nicolosi,
Yes.
one of the co-founders of NARTH. And Joseph, I think, had maybe some... regret's not the right word, but I think the term reparative therapy has been much maligned and much misunderstood. He doesn't mean that you're a Buick and you're broken, so I'm gonna come in with my straight therapy and repair you. It was more a reference to the behavior that became so compulsive was itself a repair attempt, which of course will never work, and oftentimes makes that void deeper. Did that truth? I mean, did that insight resonate with you?
Yeah, when I first started reading Dr. Nicolosi's work, I had left homosexuality and I had really given up on the practice of it, just because the failure of the gay experiment was just revealed all over my body. I just was broken, but I couldn't. There was really a very deep part of me that could not give up on the identity. So So I guess I had maybe sort of made a bargain with God a bit, where I said, you know what, I am willing to give up gay sex. And at the time, that wasn't a big deal for me because I really wanted to give it up. But I said, I can't give up everything because I felt like being gay or gay was such a huge part of me, of who I was. So I said, that I'm not going to give up. But I just kept running into so many problems in my own life because I couldn't give up, just in terms of my relationship with other men. It just kept getting in the way. I mean, even straight men, I just couldn't have a healthy relationship with them. And because that kept just, it was just always in the forefront. So I read, I don't know how I found it, but I came across one of Dr. Nicolosi's books, and I was just reading all of the stuff. He talks a lot about the father wound that gay men have, and also just with that we have, or gay men have with their peers, and it all rang so true to me. And again, it was like when I was gay and when I was in it, I just couldn't see anything. It's sort of bizarre. It's like when you're in a cult, you don't realize you're in a cult until you're like deprogrammed.
Right. Yeah. The fish don't notice the water.
Yeah. So I was reading about all these case studies that he had done of men that had bad relationships with their dad, or they were abused, or they were bullied, or whatever. And I kept reading it, and I was like, wow, this rings so true with men that I knew and all of my friends, that we all sort of had these experiences. And oftentimes we would share them, but they didn't come across as odd at the time, or even like noteworthy. It was just like we all had the same sort of growing up and the same sort of feelings. And when Dr. Nicolosi talked about it and how that really affected everything you did later, it just made so much sense. I mean, and not every man that has a bad relationship with his dad or is bullied or something is going to be gay, because I've had this conversation with straight guys that are maybe more pro-gay, and they say, well, I had a horrible relationship with my dad and I'm not gay. But I mean, homosexuality is really only about 2% of the population. Mm-hmm. It's fairly rare. So I mean, when you have like what I think of as like a perfect storm, where you have like a disconnected father, and you maybe have a boy that's perhaps sensitive, or
with a controlling mother into the mix.
Yeah, that doesn't help. Yeah, or is awkward, and then you're right, Patrick. You have a mother that's cloying or overprotective, or it's just a weird combination of stuff. And then things are going on at school, and something just sort of clicks. And again, Dr. Nicolosi wasn't, he was trying to point out that there are men that do fit this certain scenario. And I was certainly one of them. I knew a bunch of guys that were. And I just think it was such a big revelation just to read it. Yeah. And then to realize that all that can be, that deep therapy, and you can work on that stuff. Because it's just, people don't talk about it. It's not explored. I mean, the issue of homosexuality and its origins is like, it's taboo. You can't talk about it. You're just born that way. It's genetic, you know. So
we're going to get to the born that way. I also want to ask you about your work in the Castro as a basically street evangelist for the gospel and for chastity. The website is josephsciambra.com. I'll put a link to his website in the show notes. Also want to talk about his appearance on the Howard Stern Show and the evidence so far about whether or not one is born gay. Don't go away. Quick message right here on the Patrick Coffin Show. Just a quick personal invitation to join us in Italy next year. That's April 3rd through the 12th, 2018. We're going to be in Rome for Divine Mercy Sunday. We will go to Mass at St. Peter's Church, 12 noon on Divine Mercy Sunday. We're also going to be in Assisi and Siena and Orvieto. Our spiritual director is Father David Genuine of the Diocese of Santa Rosa. Great guy. Lots and lots. I can't even compress all the things we're going to experience there. But I do want to give the website out where you can register and save $100 if you register before November 3rd. It's patrickcoffin.media. /Italy. That's patrickcoffin.media/Italy. We're going to taste Italian wine and pray at the great sites in Orvieto and Siena, the 4 major basilicas in Rome, including the Capuchin Bone Church there, which is a real trip and a half. We'll be in a papal audience with Pope Francis on Wednesday if the Holy Father is in Rome. And it's overall a bucket list trip. So Assisi, Siena, Orvieto, and Rome, April 3rd through the 12th next year. Hope you can join us at patrickcoffin.media/Italy. See you there. Back with Joseph Sciambra, former gay porn actor and occultist, now a Catholic evangelist. I don't want to get into the gnarly, dark details here, but when you first walked onto a porn set, were you nervous? Were you excited? Was it an adventure, or did you realize you were breaking a terrible taboo from which you might not be able to recover? What was your mindset?
Not nervous, not excited. No.
Not nervous or excited?
No. It was like nothing. People don't realize what the gay... I wrote my book. I know it's over the top. I wrote my book in like 2013 when we were leading up to the gay marriage, Supreme Court decision. Mm-hmm. And I saw in pop culture, I think is so important, but I saw it just informs everybody, especially young people. Yep. And I just saw this remaking of homosexuality with people like Ellen DeGeneres and who's that other guy? Nate Berkus and the Doogie Howser guy.
Well, why don't you say any TV character now? Just put it that way.
Neil Patrick Harris.
Right.
I mean, there was a certain presentation of homosexuality, especially male homosexuality, is being very sedate, and it didn't have anything to do with sex. It was just sort of like a preference. You know?
Who you love.
Yeah, like I like strawberry ice cream, and somebody else likes, chocolate or whatever. It wasn't complicated. There was nothing more to it than that. And so I wrote the book and said, you know what? When you get into, especially male homosexuality, it is a freaky world that, you are never going to see in the straight world. And it's not that every gay guy is doing that kind of stuff, is getting tied up on Folsom and Harrison in San Francisco. The majority are not. But if
we might add, and who may be embarrassed by all that.
Yeah, and if you're of a certain bent, there's a lot of avenues for you to take in the gay world, if you want to call it that, that are not available in the heterosexual milieu. A book that is so informative, and I wish people would read it. It's been forgotten, unfortunately, and so is he. But is Randy Schultz's And the Band Played On, which was about and he was a San Francisco journalist. I was blessed to get to meet him a few times. But he said something so insightful at the beginning of that book. And and as an aside, that book was not taken well by the gay community. And he said that things get crazy, or you say gnarly, in the gay community very quickly, in the gay male community, is because you do not have the moderating influence of women. Right. You do not have someone who will say no.
The civilizing principle, right? Yeah.
So marriage and monogamy, I would say, are still not a gay male phenomena. And I would dare to say, if it wasn't for women, they wouldn't be a phenomena among heterosexual men too. And
what do you mean by that?
Well, you know what, Patrick? For a while, I was bisexual, so I did date women, and it's weird, but I did it sort of concurrently while I was gay. So I was with guys as girls at the same time. And women, and I dated, the women that I dated were not prudish, but there was stuff that they absolutely positively would not do that I could find men within 5 minutes in the gay community that would be willing to do it. I got into to prostitution as, a John.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was younger, because I wanted to explore some really sick fantasies that I had seen in porn. And, women aren't going to do it. So I started seeking out street prostitutes. And there were street prostitutes that absolutely positively, even after being, trying to bribe them with lots of money, they would not do it. So I just got into more and more deeply into gay sex because there was such a plethora of willing participants.
Was the end point for you going to the other side, not a John but a provider as an escort, where then you're the one saying yes to everything. You're not going cap in hand. People are coming to you.
Where I did it?
Yeah. Was it one more step on your ultimately your journey to conversion, but darker and darker and darker? You went from John to escort. So you're a provider, right?
Right. In the beginning, it was just a big power trip for me, and it had to do with sort of instilling some sort of order into my life, because at least when I was, I'm trying to be PG. When I was...
Go for PG-13 then, Joseph.
You have like a master-slave dynamic. When I was the master, that's a big head trip for people. So when I got into that space, that headspace, that worked for me for a while. But with all of that stuff, it only works for a while. So I couldn't maintain it. And then it's bizarre. And then I ended up sort of flip-flopping and taking on the slave role, because there was a certain order and a certain, containment in that.
Yeah, it's a kind of a control, isn't it? Where things are somewhat predictable. I want to fast forward to the true master, the divine master, and the chains of slavery that our Lord Jesus Christ wrought in your life. How did you encounter Christ, Joseph? Was it a moment of where you just cried out to God in prayer? Was it, obviously, because I read the book, the sacrament of confession was really huge for you. But how did you find your way home? How did grace make it through all that darkness?
Christ was not on my radar. It actually was like the last thing. I always say I'm sort of an accidental convert. Because just on the night that which was to be my last night on earth, Christ just took pity on me. Because at that point, my mom and dad still always held out hope for me. I know they were really the only ones, because I was pretty far gone. I was extreme. I looked insane, and I acted pretty nutty. And, so my mom and dad, I know they hadn't given up hope, but I know they thought that, either I would end up dead or I would end up on I don't know what they knew. But my point is, everybody gave up on me, and even my friends did, who were also gay, and the Lord just took pity on me that night. I can't explain it. It was just a mystery.
The near-death experience?
Yeah. I got into very... Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Caused by what?
Well, it was progressive. My health just really stunk. I was never HIV positive, but I had everything else. And I wasn't taking care of my health. And I was just worn down, thin, sick, anemic, bleeding all the time. And I had just given up. I really didn't care if I lived or died, because so many people that I had loved and known had gone before me very young. There's just nothing. And I tried everything. I really did. I know somebody that interviewed me said, well, geez, was there nothing that you wouldn't try? And I was like, no, there just wasn't. I was just so desperate. I was desperate for love, but my main motivation behind everything that I did was that I just wanted the suffering to stop.
Yeah.
There was just so much pain in me from when I was a kid that just got worse and worse. And then when I got into this stuff and you start doing it, And then you have all that stuff that, so I just had so much pain and so many layers of pain that I just wanted it to quit. And at that point, I thought the only way for at least for me to get some rest was just to die. So I was willing to do it. But then I don't know what I thought, because I didn't believe in anything. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in an afterlife. I don't know what I believed in. And I knew my friends had died, and I just kind of imagined that they were like sleeping somewhere, that they were just, at peace finally. And I thought, well, I'm going to join them. And then when the time came for me to go, it was like, this is not good. This is bad.
Yeah, this is real.
Exactly.
Right. So the Lord took pity on you and drew you to himself, and you went to confession. And I'm just trying to compress a lot, Joseph, here. You decided to go on the Howard Stern show with your story. And I've seen the interview. I thought you did very, very well. I mean, Howard tried to use you as a circus, little freak. That's his shtick. But I have to think that you touched some people with your, just a childlike willingness to tell the story, even though there was some exploitation on Howard's. I mean, Howard's not a missionary; he's a capitalist, so he wants to exploit your story. Did you have people come to you back channel saying, "Thanks for appearing. You gave me something to think about"?
I do. When it first aired, and then he's aired it, I think, at least one other time, and then people still watch it or listen to it on YouTube. And that was in 2013. I still get emails from people saying, I turned it on because I thought it was going to be some goofy thing about a guy that used to do porn or something, and it just got me thinking about something else. And I mean, at the time, people were upset with me that I appeared on the show, Catholics. But at the time, I mean, nobody, present company accepted, nobody was really inviting me to be on. So I thought, well, Howard invited me on, and I talked with the producer, and they were sort of willing to work with me. And I said, you know what, if this is where the Holy Spirit is leading me, I can't be any more merciful or compassionate towards other people than the church has been to me.
Right.
So,
well, and they're not going to go to church. The church's got to go to Howard or whatever. So.
Right. So yes, I did my best.
Tell me about Jesus Loves Gay Men and what you do in the Castro now. You got a pink T-shirt. You walk in there. You take selfies with. I mean, I've never seen get-ups on people that now are worn to these pride parades. They look like figures from a horror movie, a parody of. It all beggars description to me. But you show up, Joseph. I don't know who else does what you're doing. I think it's fantastic, because you see the hurting little boy in the kind of butch, tough leather figures. How do they react to you? Are you kind of a novelty, or are some people grateful that you're there, and maybe some people that you used to make acquaintance with? Hey, I recognize that guy now with the Jesus Loves Gay Men T-shirt.
Yeah, it happens occasionally. Overall, I would say that gay men, and I do gravitate towards the gay guys because I just feel like I have more of a conversation with them as opposed to the lesbians. But they're, I mean, it's different from what the conception is of them. They're sort of apolitical a lot of times. I mean, gay men and heterosexual men have much more in common with each other than, say, a gay guy and a gay woman. I mean, for the gay guys, it's a lot about the sex. And I just talk to them about it. And I just really start from a place of my own personal testimony. And I say, it sounds strange, but I just say, I haven't had sex in, how many years has it been? 17 years. And they find that remarkable. They don't find anything about a handful of completely forgotten little grade Z porn movies that I did that nobody cares about. But they do find
grade Z. Okay.
They do find that compelling that here is someone that, was in their shoes, and they don't have sex anymore, because a lot of these guys will open up to me and say, well, gee, I masturbate every day and I have sex every other day, or I'm going to the clubs, or I'm going to bathhouses or whatever. So that is so completely alien to them. But, and I seem, to them, I seem, well-adjusted and happy and everything. So they want to talk to me about it. They're actually earnestly interested. I mean, I don't think the Catholic Church has tapped into that if you present these men and women who have really moved beyond homosexuality, but also just the gay sex and the whole gay scene, that people will find that inspiring, and some people will just be interested, and they do. I have talks and conversations with people on the street. I don't know what eventually comes out of it.
Right.
It's sad because, I mean, like Gay Pride, for instance, that draws over 1 million people to San Francisco, and it's the biggest gathering of the LGBT community in the world. And when I used to go in the 90s, even things were changing. It was much smaller, and it was predominantly a gay audience. But now you have a lot of young people and people from all walks of life and all demographics, but also the members of the LGBT community, they're directly involved in everything and very sexually active, is so much younger now. And I've talked to people in their late teens and early 20s, and they've had all these different courses of antibiotics, and they've been exposed to all these different diseases. And I talk to them and I say, my goodness, what you're describing now is what I went through when I was much older, into my late 20s. And that was after, being very sexually promiscuous. But again, they've grown up in such a different atmosphere than I grew up, and the culture does have such a big impact. I know some like conservative Catholics will say, "Oh, we're not going to discuss Katy Perry. We're not going to discuss Miley Cyrus, because that's just something that's going on over here, and it's not, it doesn't touch my life." But it does, because it touches the whole culture, and I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. Joseph, I wish we had more time, but we've got a guardrail here. Why do you think the Catholic Church is wise to not use the phraseology gay, lesbian, LGTB?
Yeah. You know what? I use it, Patrick. I mean, I'm using it right now.
No, it's shorthand. I understand. But when we're talking about the clarity of the doctrine of chastity and the redemption wrought by Christ, and the fact that you can't reduce a human being in all of his complexity to a sexual inclination. People are very complex, and it's a multi-layered story. It's not just one thing.
No, I don't. I don't identify as gay. I'll identify as ex-gay, I guess. But yeah, and I've talked about this with you as well. I mean, it's an identity. I mean, it's where. Okay. There's a certain approach that, and I talk about this with families a lot, that are dealing with someone with same-sex attraction in the family, and they will say, well, I have a son or I have a daughter who is in an irregular marriage or an invalid marriage or something, or is shacked up or something, and they take a certain tact in their interactions with them, and they don't agree with what they're doing. But it's so different, because I mean, those things that the heterosexual couple is doing is not right. But it's not an identity. Their whole being is not wrapped up in that. I mean, if that relationship doesn't work out, I mean, they could certainly move on and make things correct and go to confession and get an annulment or whatever they need to do and get married in the church.
Right.
But it's not an identity. And even alcoholism or porn addictions or different things that people get involved in, it is not an identity. It's so different. I can't explain, or I can't describe any sort of phenomenon that's like this. It goes so deeply into people's consciousness, and it did with me. So and this is where it becomes very hard to have any kind of dialogue or debate on this issue, because and you can come from a place of great charity and compassion like I do, or I try to do, and I want to discuss, maybe just why all male sex is not necessarily such a good thing for you physically. I mean, for you psychologically, let alone spiritually.
Right.
And people take it so personally, they can't separate themselves from it.
That's right.
Because that is their identity.
Right. You're just touching that third rail, and they can kind of see where the spear's going. But people who commit adultery, they don't go join the adultery community, or have a tag, I am an adulterer. In that case, we clearly distinguish the person from the behavior.
Yeah, there isn't one. And there is, for these people that are at a loss like I was, and I was really looking for something to make things, okay.
Yeah.
And my heart goes out to these young people because, and I've had these conversations with people who are maybe of more conservative bent, and I say, these young people essentially, when they go to the gay community, or they come out, or they go to San Francisco or LA or New York, wherever they're going, I don't think, and I know I didn't, because I came out probably at the worst time ever, which was 1988, which was the height of the AIDS crisis. And I really was looking for friendship, and I was looking for companionship and
right.
love.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a hurt young man, I never had a straight man reach out to me. And I don't know what would have happened if a heterosexual guy, an older man, would have put his arms around me and just said, I want to be your friend, and I know you're hurting, and I know you're in pain, but I want to help you. Things might have turned out very differently for me, and maybe I would have still gone in the direction I did. I don't know. But
when you say ex-gay, Joseph, are you saying that maybe in your life, or people that who've embraced chastity and are used to abstaining from the thing that hurt them so much, that you or other folks in your circle are able to move into heterosexual functioning? Is that part of the goal, or are you just happy to have the beachhead of chastity and not do the behavior that's sinful?
Yeah, I definitely. Part of being chaste was part of dealing with the disordered, inclination that I had to deal with. And I wanted to have, because I always longed for friendships with men, and I wanted to have healthy friendships with men. And it was very difficult to do if I was drawn to them, even with straight men, if I was drawn to them sexually and there was a sexual attraction. So I had to tackle that. And through, gay men a lot of times have weird relationships with women. You kind of touched upon that with mothers. And as, I had better relationships with men, specifically straight family men. I could see the dynamic within their families with their wives and their children. And I had such a great appreciation for it that I never had as a gay man. We always had to characterize femininity with like the drag queen. We could never really, yeah. And so when it was such a healing process for me, and I encourage, it's difficult because I know a lot of straight guys don't want to, not that they're homophobic or anything, but I know a lot of heterosexual guys don't necessarily want to befriend a man that has this issue because they just don't have the time or whatever. But it is so important because I did get to witness the beautiful harmony between men and women. And then I became attracted to that just naturally because it's such a fulfillment of the masculine role within marriage. It's just so beautiful. And
you touched on that earlier with the order in the universe. It is ordered toward our goodness, our good, our peace. Of course, we know that is the natural law, but I think there's still a way to translate it to people that the disorder will never ever work as a long-term strategy.
And you can't find it in male homosexuality. That's why you have all this tweaking. That's why they keep trying to fix it. With you have these extreme swerves towards bondage, and then also I think like gay marriage. A lot of people thought that was sort of the triumph of sort of the gay experiment. I don't. I think it was its ultimate failure. Because when I went into the gay lifestyle, it really wasn't discussed, and I think that Stonewall is in '69, and then the first 8 cases were around '78, so it did fall apart very quickly, and I think people have continued trying to make it work, and I think gay marriage was just sort of that final trying to sacramentalize the union and say, well, hey, maybe that, and it's forcing it and saying, hey, maybe that will make it work, and it's still not.
Do you think that, this is my last question, do you think that efforts like Father James Martin's book, Building Bridges, produces the kind of repentance and clear understanding of what the church teaches about the behavior? Do you see evidence that these kinds of outreaches are not just among a friendly bubble, but are having an impact? What's your take on that approach?
Well, what he's doing now was what I encountered because if you live in a gay ghetto, like you live in San Francisco, or you live in West Hollywood, or you live in Chelsea, where not all gay people live there, but they're definitely concentrated in certain areas, and you tend to, if you're feeling like at a loss and things aren't working, and say you do sort of trip into a Catholic church because they got the rainbow flag hanging outside, and that's what I did. I went to just a name-reading parish, and like Father Martin does right now, I was told by the priest, God created you gay, you were made gay, and God understands this, and you need to work within that framework. And heterosexuals, have a different framework that they're working under. And it just did not make any sense to me. And what he is spouting also doesn't make sense about telling people that they were born this way. They're just never going to see themselves outside of a gay context. Ever. If you tell somebody that you're born gay, I mean, what hope do they have? They don't have any. He's imprisoning them within this, and I just don't think it's just healthy. I don't believe that anyone's gay, let alone born gay.
Right.
I just think it's something that certain people, a rare group of people, it's just something that they turn to in order to, like I said, relieve the suffering. They found an identity, they found a community, and it makes sense to them. But it's an illusion.
Well, it's certainly not true home with the kind of friendship with Jesus Christ that he wants for us and that you've obviously found. JosephSciambra.com is the website. If you're listening right now and you've got anything out of it, bring Joseph to your next event. He needs to have more open doors in the Catholic world. And I know evangelicals love you. Protestants have glommed on to your courage and your story, Joseph. And I my lips to God's ears, the title changed a little bit, and you'll be able to get the word out there among our fellow papists. Joseph Sciambra. It's SCIAMBRA.com. It's always an honor, Joseph. Keep up the good work, buddy.
God bless you, Patrick.
All right. This is the Patrick Coffin Show. There'll be show notes with some of the books and resources we mentioned today at patrickcoffin.media. Be a saint. What else is there?